So last week in January, the Senior Bowl is officially kicking off the pre-draft process. Perfect time for a way too early and completely uninformed 4-round mock draft for the Saints. Today, I'll walk you through my methodology concerning free agency, how I'm looking at the draft, actually go ahead and make the draft, and spoiler alert, I think I screwed up our second round pick. I'm Tim. Let's talk Saints. So before we get to the madness of a way too early 4-round mock draft at the end of January before a lot of relevant information isn't available or even known. I've just method to my madness of how we're going to do this because I think you need to set up some parameters. Biggest one being is what are the Saints' biggest priority needs that they need to address in free agency? My mind, it's two. Both have to do with the running game. Priority number one, developing an actual NFL running game for the offense consistently for 17 games, help your explosiveness, being able to use more play action effectively, being able to run the ball in the red zone effectively should also get you more points. And the ability to do both of those, balancing the offense, adding to time of possession, especially when you need to slow the game down with a lead, say the last 4 minutes. All this stuff helps the defense out tremendously. Now, that's not enough because when you get to the defensive side, and the emphasis there needs to be on stopping the run, especially with the interior. You still need to bring in some more players, some better players, and some younger players in some instances. So that's what I'm looking at free agency. Then from there, the other priorities, needs, or wants, however you want to call it, start filling that in with the draft and maybe later versions of free agency getting after June 2nd. To come up with a list of names is hard right now because here's information we don't know. Not all coaching positions have been filled. Not all staffs have been filled. Some of those staff fills could affect your current staff in that they may get hired, promoted, and hired away somewhere else. That's not talking about schemes changes, player position changes. And then when you add in all that, how it affects the rookie class plus the rookies, still need their measurables, their medicals. And once you get all this information for free agents and rookies, then you can complete your boards, put them in a more realistic order. Right now, the only thing you have to go on is production numbers, metrics, and film. Only place I can get information based on that is PFF, and that's exactly what they they are doing right now. January 25th, their last update on their free agent big board, based solely on 3 years of snap counts, 3 years of film grades, and 3 years of production and metrics. For the draft board, it is based on 3 years of snap counts, 3 years of PFF grades, and 3 years of production and advanced metrics. All the other stuff gets figured out and answered. They'll start adding that in. And by the time free agency starts in March and the draft in April, they'll have an updated list complete with analysis with all the unknown stuff right now factored in. So all we can do, or all I can do, is just kind of go off that list. The only thing I really cared about the list is I wanted to know out of the top 100 in the top 50, what player positions under their current analysis are going to be available the most. Edge, safeties, 16 in the top 100, but 9 and 2 respectively in the top 50. Running back, 11 in the top 100, 9 of those in the top 50. Linebacker, 10 in the top 100, 6 in the top 50. Wide receiver, 9, and then 7 in the top 50. After that, the numbers start sliding fast. As far as it affects the Saints, going back to their two needs and looking at how we're going to address it in free agency. Left guard, running back, dual tight end with a lot of blocking ability and ability to catch the ball, or at the very least, a flat out effective blocking tight end. Those are the three things that I think they need to go get in free agency because you're better off with the known quantity that you can get from the NFL instead of some unknowns in the draft or some draft positions just being so thin that you may not be able to find a top guy with where you're picking. Thing is, with these numbers, when you're looking at left guards, because that is the key to me, is they've got to improve that left guard position. If they don't improve by adding a serious high caliber NFL level running back, one of those two things have to happen. Odds are in free agency, you're going to have a better chance doing a running back than the left guard. Left guard, there's 4 guys in the top 100, only 2 in the top 50. It's a commodity. It's going to be hard to get. You look at tight ends, all 4, 2 in the top 50, 4 in the top 100, all pass catchers with not much blocking ability. You can go figure out who they are. So I don't know if it's really going to add a lot to the running game to add basically another Juwan Johnson type. But further down the list, you can start finding them. Outside of that, I think you're going to start addressing the defensive line, interior. More bad news there. Only 3 in the top 100, or 3 in the top 50, 6 in the top 100. But the 3 in the top 50, all are 32 years old plus, all with multiple seasons in the NFL, and all likely in the Devon Godshaw category, who we already have under contract. They were great players at high level at their position at one time, but there is some decline involved. And the fact that you had to pull 3 of those type players to get in your top 50 leads me to believe there's not going to be significant help available in free agency. So that's how I'm going to address that when we get to the draft portion. And when we get to the draft board right now, Jeremiah Love, Caleb Downs are 2 players that I'd love to take at 8 if they actually show up there, and I think they're no-brainers. There's more than a handful of guys that once we get into the pre-draft process, and then some of them are going to be in positions of need, yeah, no-brainer. Take them at 8 if they're available. If multiple are there, even better. But right now, I think the best guess case scenario for free agency based on what limited information we have now, more than likely top 50 running back, really going after one of the top guys. I think maybe a Hall or a Walker shows up there because I just don't think you can count on Jeremiah Love being there at 8 like I would love to count on. More to the point, that left guard position is going to be really, really hard to fill. Dylan Radunz may be the option to bring back, and then drafting someone to push him, replace him, and then see what happens after that. Radunz makes the top 250 at 172, and we're going to talk a little bit more about that in a second. So outside of that, defensive line is going to be a big need, whether it's interior or edge. I think you're going to have to add some help there. Linebacker, I think you have to go sign a veteran to bridge it, to see if Stutzman is the guy. If not, you're going to be looking for draft help there too eventually. So get a guy for a couple of seasons. There's a lot in the price range of Demario Davis and ability of Demario Davis to choose from. I feel like they should be able to land one of those guys. Overall, some interesting notes bringing that up about the top 100 and the top overall 250. Just looking at Saint players. One Saint in the top 50 is Demario Davis at number 50. One Saint from 51 to 100, Cam Jordan at edge, 54. Radunz and Moreau, the only other 2 that make it into the top 50. Radunz, like I said, at 172, Moreau at 248. So when we're talking about that left guard tight end position, if it's not specifically them, pretty much that's kind of the range. Outside of 150 and beyond, you're going to be looking for free agent players. Alontae Taylor's not in the top 250 right now. And if he doesn't show up there by the time they finalize the list heading right in the free agency, I think we know the answer what's going to happen there. Defensive interior, like I said, you only have 3 in the top 50, 32 plus. All in the range of what you already have in Godshaw. You may still have to add one of those guys, but we'll see how that plays out. Tight ends, like I said, pass catchers all at the top. But Moreau types or Stoll types, the block full-blown, just primarily blockers, they're all floating around there. You're probably going to have to dip in there and add some of that. One thing I will say about the 6 linebackers, here's the last 2 on the list in the top 50. Obviously, Davis is a 58. Number 48, Bobby Wagner, also 14 seasons, 2 years younger than Davis. You're probably looking at the other 4 guys. I think Devin Bush is one of them. He's probably a bridge. The remainders, like Lloyd and those guys, that may be a multi-year deal, and you may turn it over to him to give Stutzman more time, or Stutzman to develop to be the linebacker next to him. Hard to say, but I think that's your best options on the defense side. Free agency, make sure you nail down that linebacker and figure out what you could possibly do on the defensive line. All that being said, You're already looking at the draft and the five names I took in the 4 rounds. So let's go ahead, break down round one, and show you what I was thinking about the other four. So let's go ahead and jump in the first round, then we'll turn around and go through each pick individually. Basically, in the first round, it's my no brainers. I have one on offense right now, Jeremiah Love. I have one on defense, Caleb Downs. I have a lot of players. Once a few questions get answered, that I'm sure is going to get answered in the pre draft process. Guys like Peter Woods, Jordan Tyson, David Bailey, Ruben Bain Jr., Arvel Reese. Sure, they're all going to, or maybe not all, but more names are going to fall into the I don't have any questions. But there's a third name, and that's why I took him, that falls into I don't have any questions. That's Carnell Tate. Pretty sure right now we have enough information to know what we're getting. Woods checks all the boxes and becomes a no brainer in the top 10, and he's available. That is definitely a position of need. And I can tell you this, my question on him, PFF information, his metrics, his grades, everything, his run stopping lags behind his pass rushing ability. If it's confirmed that that is not true, that no, it's not a huge concern about his run stopping ability, he can bring it, then he becomes a no brainer and he becomes a priority. The other option at 8 is moving down from there and looking at some of the other defensive interior linemen, Banks with Florida, Christian Miller from Georgia, and Caden McDonald from Ohio State all show up on this list. And there's going to be some more coming out in the second round, that top of the second round, that may be available. I think overall, though, defensive interior, you're going to see a shuffle there. You're going to see some positions locked in. And I think there are going to be opportunities, whether or not the Saints want to trade down, or with 42 and some draft capital left on day 2, trading up for one of those defensive interior, or the guy that I like the most in here that solves the biggest problems on the offensive side, Vega Ioane, the left guard from Penn State. He is a box checker as far as the Saints are concerned. But I don't know if anybody thinks he's the second coming of Quentin Nelson, and that's the only way you'd even consider taking him at 8. But if trade down opportunity presents itself and you move down in the middle first round, pick up some extra day 2 capital, he's a good pick. And the flip side of that is, with some extra day 2 capital sitting on top of 42, you might even be able to trade back into the bottom of the first, like we said, to get one of the defensive interior. Trading, I decided I'm not taking any trades, making any trades, or offering any trades in this draft. I'm going to stay in the positions as they are. I'm going to try to pick accordingly, but just wanted to present the Saints could be in a unique position to do some stuff in the first round based on picking at 8 and having 4 picks on day 2. Now, a quick word on why I don't have any questions about Carnell Tate before we get into the nuts and bolts of it. I'm a believer that when a college goes about 10 years of taking a player out of position, regardless of the name, regardless of the year, getting him drafted in the NFL, especially over the top 3 rounds, and watching him produce year after year, you kind of have to factor that history into it. Going all the way back in the day that I can remember, once upon a time, there was about a 10-year stretch where if you needed a tailback, USC was throwing them out there. You needed a wide receiver, University of Miami was throwing them out there. You needed a linebacker, Penn State was producing a monster almost every single year. The last 10 years since we drafted Michael Thomas in 2016, that's 10 consecutive drafts. A lot of Ohio State wide receivers have been drafted, and you have a slew of them who are the 2, 3, 4 varieties, like a Noah Brown or Curtis Samuel, who've stuck around forever. You do have some bust in there, but no school has thrown up stuff like, if you want to look at least 1,000-yard receiving but in the years between 2016 and 2025, 1,000 yards receiving and 75 more receptions. Michael Thomas did it 4 times. Terry McLaurin has done it 5 times. Garrett Wilson has done it 3 times. Chris Olave has done it 3 times. And Jackson Smith, the Enigma, just put his name in the hat this year. It's incredible production, and that's not counting what may happen over the last 2 that were taken which Marvin Harrison Jr. is entering his third year and his time's probably running out to have his breakout season. And Ibuka for Tampa Bay started out like his was going to be his rookie year until the end of the season when Tampa Bay spiraled down the drain and sucked him down with them. He's still an outlier sitting out there. So we're about to jump into specifically looking at some of the stuff with Tate. But in the back of my mind, you just keep seeing these top end receivers coming out of Ohio State, many cases producing year after year after year. And you may be adding a guy based on just basically half of his rookie season last year. You may have another one joining the list. We'll see how it turns out in 2026. I think Tate's going to have to disprove a lot of stuff to me more than he needs to prove anything to me. So going through the 5 draft picks, let's go ahead and start obviously with Carnell Tate, our first round pick. Let me remove that just in case you want to see how PFF graded it out, what I did so far. When it comes to Tate, what I like is when you look at basically his 2025 comparables. So these are all wide receivers in the NCAA that have 50 or more targets. He's in the top end in PFF's receiving grade, yards per route run at basically 3 yards per route. That 0.0 drop rate gap really doesn't get any better than that. Contested catch rate of 85.7% and grades out pretty good against man. So some ability to beat man coverage, ability to work in the zone. Yards after catch 4.5, 4.5 yards, not bad. Average depth of target 14 yards, 11 deep catches for 453 yards is outstanding. Screen, they used him 7 times, came up a little short of 10 yards a catch. Slot catches, only 5. So he's predominantly an outside guy. If you look at his overall numbers, 51 receptions, 66 targets, 17.2 average, and 9 touchdowns. Pretty good, solid numbers. He gets anywhere close to that in the NFL. He's about as solid as number 2 in complementary receivers you want, bringing the ability to run good routes, catch the ball, and catch a contested pass. Overall, I don't really have any questions about his ability other than the only one lingering is what exactly is his ceiling? Can he grow into a more explosive, true number 1 receiver? And I think that's when people are looking at Dyson. That's what's coming up there. Is he that guy? That's where I lean into the history a little bit. More times than not, in the last 10 years, the history tells you if it's a Ohio State receiver, the answer to that is probably yes, way more than the answer is going to be probably no. It's a good hedge bet because you don't know what Olave's future is out right now. Right now, we think we have a pretty good idea, but as I'm filming this, it ain't a done deal yet. And so he could conceivably be an answer further down the road if the Olave extension does not happen. So overall, I think right now, until one of those interior guys prove, yeah, we need to take them, whether we take them at 8 or try to trade down and grab them, I think your sure bet best player left available out of that group is Carnell Tate. So moving on to the second round, which kind of leads us into what happened in the third round. Gonna have to give a little context first, but we're going to be talking about edge player from Miami, Akheem Mesidor, and defensive interior player, defensive tackle, Darrell Jackson Jr. from Florida State. Now, the context is this. At this point, Ione is gone. Pregnon, left guard for Oregon's the only premier left guard left in the draft. Kind of hoping we could sneak him down to 42. He did not make it. He was taken very early in the second. So there's no meaningful interior lineman in the draft at this position. He was pretty much one of 2, and they're both gone. So looking at what's available and addressing needs, right now I'm looking at that defensive line. Couple answers come up. Best available talent-wise is edge player Akheem Mesidor from Miami. The biggest need with the best player is on the interior, Lee Hunter from Texas Tech. In retrospect, I made a mistake right here. Should have taken Hunter. Because at this point, Hunter is the top remaining defensive interior lineman left. There's been a little rash of them taken through the first and a couple more in the beginning of the second before they got to us. Corleone, Orange, and Jackson Jr. are your next three. Here's the difference. Corleone, Orange, and Jackson, stout run defenders, really good there. They don't bring much in pass rush. They're going to be rotational pieces at first to stop the run, which is fine because they're pretty good, all three of them, but not much in pass rush that you would have to develop, or this pick is not probably a second round pick area. Hunter brings a pass rush. In fact, that 53 is probably a little low for him, and this is where I made the mistake. I should have went ahead and taken him, but I'm like, we're picking again at 73, and Mesidor is such a freakish player that I think he's the answer, and then we can look, maybe Hunter falls, and then we get really, really lucky, or we're going to fill in with the rotation. And when you look at Mesidor's numbers, he is stout in every phase of the game. The one really kind of knock on him, and we're looking for help in run defense, is his run stop rate at 4.9%, little below the average. But it's not horrible. It's not terrible, and maybe something you're able to work with. But overall, he brings pass rush, he can set an edge, he plays defense, and they have him, and this is the big one for me. They have him listed as 6'3", 280. Great size, primarily an outside the tackle defender, if you look at his snap counts, but does line up basically in the three tech over the tackle at times. Saw him do it in the college playoffs. In fact, they would stack a couple of times. Miami stacked him and Bain together on the same side, with one of them playing in the three and one of them playing wide, and it was very effective. So kind of reminds me of a Carl Granderson, if that 280-pound weight is true, because he didn't look that big watching him play in college. Once we get the final measurements, once they get into the combine and they do all that stuff, if he's anywhere near that, then I think he's the legit pick. But even after I made the pick and while I'm shooting the video, I'm seriously questioning his size. There's no questioning Hunter's size. So I would say this at the very least, in my defense, I may have gotten suckered in with an incorrect measurement here from PFF. We don't know. But if that's accurate, I'll stand by the pick. But if not, I'll tell you I made a mistake, which gets us to having to get that run stopper. And at this point, Jackson was the only one left. Orange, Corleone, gone. He is a big man, 6'5", 337. He's currently in the Senior Bowl this week, and very interested to see what comes out about him. Run defense is fantastic. Run stop rate, 8.9%, one of the best percentages that you can find in college football last year. Overall, all his snaps are coming in the B gap and the A gap. He's a big guy. He could be at least in a run component replacement or in the rotation for Devon Godshaw. And if you could get the actual pass rush, it's like the opposite of Brian Brzee, who brought the pass rush, and we've been waiting on his run defense. This guy's going to bring the run defense, gives us time to develop the pass rush, which he's going to have to do very quickly, because if he does, then you've got a solid third rounder. If he doesn't, it's a rotational piece, and I can almost promise you he will see action. There'll be times when you know they're running, and he's a good guy to have up there on the defensive front. So now we're moving into our 2 fourth-round picks. The last two we have in the top 150. At this point, again, context does kind of matter. And here, it's starting to get a jumbled mess when you looked at the draft board at this point. A lot of the mid-tier quarterbacks in this draft were just stacked up right there, and teams were doing basically what I was doing, is navigating themselves right around it and trying to fill in roster spots. I was looking for best available in the interior of the offense and defensive line first, then looking at tight ends and defensive backs, and quite frankly, really the only value sitting there was guard Kaylon Rutledge from Georgia Tech and center Pat Coogan in that spot. But I think they're both very good picks for the Saints in this scenario. When you look at Rutledge, whole career was a right guard. Last year, 2025, Georgia Tech, he checked a lot of boxes as far as run blocking ability and pass blocking ability. 6'4", 330. If that holds true, very good size. What I like about him is in that year, you're looking at he took 872 offensive snaps. I don't know where the 872nd one was. The other 871 were at right guard. Didn't allow any sacks, only 2 hits, only 4 hurries. Really, really good. But what I was hearing from him or about him, good run blocking ability, which he showed out on, but kind of a nasty disposition. From the NFL level, there was some talk, and I'm really interested to see what happens this week in the Senior Bowl because he's there. Some talk about trying to move him to left guard or center, or at least seeing if he has that capability of playing it at the NFL level because some teams think he can. And if he could, you have a really great value pick right here. But at the very least, I'm looking at someone. Can he bring the depth to back up Ruiz and think about taking that spot in the immediate future? Now, the other one is a guy that, quite honestly, I have a lot of bias towards because watching college football and especially watching the playoffs coming down, Pat Coogan. Now, I knew this about Coogan that he, in 2023, was with Notre Dame, was starting left guard. He transferred to Indiana, where Signetti moved into center. He took 1,800 snaps in 2 years at center and put up some very, very good numbers. In those 2 years at center, only allowed 1 sack and 2 hits, and that was both in the first year he did it. The second year, nobody got near him. The reason why I kind of circled him all along as a potential pick in the fourth round is once I started watching, especially that playoff run that Indiana had, I take notice when announcers are showing highlights of offensive linemen because they make a great reach block. They get downfield and make a block. They pull like a guard would when they're actually a center. And I can say all three of those things happened with Coogan during that stretch. Very, very good value pick right here for the Saints in a sneaky fix because if he does reach that potential, you probably have a pretty good chance of a true center depth piece behind McCoy that may eventually work his way into replacing him. And if you can get that in the fourth round, and by 2027 realize we don't have to worry about center because of this guy, man, that's value that you can't even measure at this point. So to wrap it up, put a bow on it. Look, this is based in, and it's the reason why it's the way too early fourth round mock. It's based heavily on some assumptions, guesstimations, hunches, combination thereof about how we're going to walk starting once the combine starts, and right after that, the real work in free agency is going to take place. But what the roster is going to look like through that building process to when the league opens in mid March, then moving on to the draft process. Trying to do that January 25, 26, 27, the last couple of days that I've been working on this, it's damn hard. It's really, really hard. But best effort, I think. A lot of value at running back and obtainable. And some guys high on that list coming out of situations and looking over at Kellen Moore, what the Saints offense did at the tail end of last year, going, I want to play there. Think that's the best chance. It's going to be harder at guard, harder at the blocking effort we need at tight end. Going to have to do some work there to find it, whether it's in free agency or the draft. Flip side on the defense, biggest takeaway, Saints don't make the mistake I made. Because if Mesidor's size doesn't match, that's a boo-boo. A guy like Hunter is immediately more of a need and a tremendous, tremendous pick at 42. Or some of the other guys that weren't there when I was drafting that may actually slide down there depending on what happens in reality. So I think those two picks, very, very key. I think the Saints can, at 8 and 42, can add some players that are going to help them. And there's always like, I didn't even go the route of trades, but I think that's a really open option for the Saints to trade down out of 8, maybe even back up in the first later on, some combination thereof, all working around the pieces where the more I look at it going, this draft, if you're going to have to find a rookie in the interior of either line, You're going to need to do some work with those draft picks because it's going to be really hard in free agency to be able to fill either one of those spots. Yeah. First time here, you like what you saw, please hit the like, share, subscribe, drop it down in the comments. Let me know. Look, about any of the picks, because quite honestly, there's a lot of arguments that can be made for somebody other than Tate at number 8, and I'd be right now probably legit. I think I could make a few of my own. I think the big key there is Woods, and let me know what you think about him. Don't quite know where we're going to be going for the next couple of videos because right now, as soon as we get out of the Senior Bowl next week, after it's over, there's going to be a little bit to talk about, but this is just one of those little periods where it winds down slightly a little bit till the combine kicks off. So may not be posting quite as often during that period, but when something pops off, I'll definitely be here to show up and we'll talk about it. So till I see you next time, I'm Tim. Peace out and who dat.